in, we can catch them up on it. All right. Welcome everybody to the show. This is the Fully Remote Talk Show, the talk show for leaders adapting their style to a fully remote world. We are on episode 13 already, and we are talking today about running better meetings for remote first teams. This obviously is one of our favorite topics to talk about. I've personally spent the last 5 years digging through organizational behavior and research on this and talked to hundreds of people about this. But this whole shift from the remote friendly world of meetings in the from 5 years back to this acceleration of remote first meetings has changed the momentum. It's actually surfaced more problems. It's made people look for more different tools and everything, and more opportunities have opened up in this space as well. And I'm excited to talk about this with somebody who has a longer time researching on this topic. And I'm welcome Florian to this show.
Thank you so much.
Florian, for those who don't know, is a facilitator, a coach, he's a trainer, and he has worked with companies for almost 2 decades now on making companies more innovative. He is from Taiwan right now, though he's originally from Germany. And so his first book that he wrote, or one of his books that he wrote, is about running better meetings in German, which he is now making an international version of it for the rest of the world. And we are excited to talk to you, Florian, today about running better meetings.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much, Arjun.
Awesome. And as we always do in the start of this show, before we get in and talk to Florian, ask him a lot of questions, is check in with our audience over here. And for those who are over here, we talk about international Taiwan, and I think it might be good to get everybody's thought on where did you go on your last vacation? And there is a text box over there that you can type and hit enter, and in a minute we will see where the rest of the world went on their last vacation. It looks like Ash is going on a vacation right now, and it's kind of nice to see somebody moving and being part of this meeting. So where did I go?
Yeah, it takes a bit to think about that.
Right?
If it takes you too long, it probably means your last vacation has been a bit too long.
Exactly. Yeah. If it took you so long to write this, then you probably have one due right now. Yeah. All right. I'm going to see where people went last. And Los Angeles. A lot more people went to Los Angeles than I would have imagined. Guatemala, the Sunshine Coast, La Jolla, that's also in California, Lake Tahoe. Oh my God, there's a California folks over here, Cancun. Oh, Gaoxiong. I have no way. I don't know how to say that.
Kaohsiung. That's the second biggest city here in Taiwan.
Okay, Kaohsiung. Okay, perfect. Florida. That's exciting, folks. All right. So for those who have just typed over here, you understand that this is an interactive show. There would be a lot more interaction, a lot more typing, a lot more coming up on stage and talking here to Florian or me or to yourself. So be prepared for doing more of that. But I'm going to jump in and get started on this interview over here and ask Florian the first question. Again, if you are interested in asking a question, feel free to raise hands. Florian, maybe give us a little bit about your work. What do you do specifically about this book that you're writing and or the book that you've written and you're writing right now?
Yes. So I'm a co-founder of a small, you could say, boutique consulting company called Effective, like creative and effective. And it tells you already a bit about the background. So our main focus now is to help our clients to create effective collaboration at scale. So that means over the entire organization. We come from a place where we're talking a lot about innovation, so help them to be more innovative and come up with new solutions and thinking. And at some point, this got us also looking at the organization and how does the organization have to be in order to deal with innovation. And then one key topic when it comes to effective collaboration at scale that you will realize in modern companies is meetings, because a lot of important exchange and decisions get made in a setting that we call meeting. So from creating effective collaboration at scale, of course, you can look at like operational things, structural things, interpersonal things, and different areas. But meetings are like it's like a focus point where often things get together and decisions then get made. So, and then it naturally came up as that's an important topic. And when you normally talk to most people in organizations ask them, so how about your meetings? How satisfied are you with their meetings? Honestly, most of the time, people will say, well, either not really or they're very unsatisfied or dissatisfied with it, right? And they would say, I hate it and it's a waste of my time. So this came up as, okay, seems to be a pain point for people. And at the same time, I also realized some people feel like kind of given up. It's like that's just what it is, and they're supposed to be that way, or you can't change it anyway. We have to just live with it in the way they are. So that's where the topic came up. And another piece of information about me, I've always been like a tool guy, in the sense of that I enjoy having like thinking tools that help you to have better thinking. And I wrote a book about thinking tools for creativity and innovation. And so I also researched in basically what are some practices already out there that people use and that could be useful to have better meetings. And so that's why the original German version of the book kind of translates for like tools for having awesome meetings. That's if you would literally like translate it. And now I've been asked, because I'm here in Taiwan and working in a lot of an international context, I've been asked by also customers to say, don't you have an English version? I mean, nobody can read German, come up with an English one. And then I also said, well, and in an international context and in a cross-cultural context, there are again other dimensions that we would have to consider when it comes to having effective meetings. And so I'm now working on that international version, basically, of course, taking the basis I created with the German version, but now kind of rewriting and adding stuff to it. And I'm now in the process of creating that.
Fantastic. This is exciting. You're already talking a lot of things that like I want to ask you about. Let me actually just double click on that point, right? Like this meeting is being one of the biggest pain points, especially now in a world where like, it's like we're all adapting to a remote first world. At least a significant number of companies are like starting to think about it this way. What is the big need of this, or like the big business impact of it? Or like another way to ask is like, why should companies care about this, right? Like you kind of answered this, but like I would love to like go a little bit deeper about like the magnitude of this problem.
So I read for when I wrote the first version of the book, the German version, I did also a lot of reading on it, and there was one guy, I think he's a Harvard researcher called David Perkins, Professor David Perkins. He does a lot about also on learning and productive conversations. And he said, and I like this very much, he said like meetings are a place where organizational intelligence could emerge, or if they're not done in a great way, it's a place where organizational stupidity could emerge. So it's and that's why it's so important, because we spend time in meetings, and meetings are also a bit like using a term from software development. Meetings are the usability test of your organizational culture. So if you are in a company and meetings are shit, sorry to use that language, then you know a bit about the company, because a lot of behaviors would show up in meetings. So first of all, it's super, and that also means that changing meetings is a leverage on changing company culture in a positive way. So that means if we get to good, positive meetings, we affect the company culture in a positive way. So that's why, and I think no company would say, oh yeah, we want to be stupid, so let's have stupid meetings, right? So nobody says that. Doesn't make sense. So everybody in theory should go like, okay, if meetings are like a boiling point for organizational intelligence to emerge, we better make sure that we have productive meetings, but also at the same time meetings that people basically want to go back to, or leave with a feeling of this was good, or this was satisfying, on a content level, on an outcome level, but also on a personal level, right? So that you are
Amazing.
also like, as a human being, you feel like this was maybe not always pleasant, but this was a good experience to be in.
Nice. This is amazing. I feel like you're totally talking. I love the whole analogy of like organizational stupidity shining through. And I think you nailed one point, which I think is a great way of thinking about it, is that like there is no meeting culture and culture differently. Meeting culture is your company culture. And that's actually like a very, very valid point to like remember. Great points. I feel like yeah, I have a lot of questions that I want to ask, but before that, I'm going to jump in and do like a quick activity with folks. You sort of said this really well, right? Like most of us, I've heard about this as well, right? Like we all have a love-hate relationship with meetings. In that, like we mostly love to hate meetings. We have all the reasons why we hate meetings, and I want everybody over here to be able to like say what you think are the reasons why you hate meetings. This could be like the big transgressions, or like your pet peeves, whatever it is there. Like they can maybe be cardinal sins, but like I hate meetings that. And I feel like this is just rolling off of people's like keyboards right now, because they all hate meetings for so many reasons. But maybe Florian, if you can share with us what you think are like sort of the top things that people hate meetings for, and that you've heard.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the things that are coming up, I mean, these are very often things that you hear. So I think which will tie into, when we later will, I guess we will speak about what makes meetings great, or what are ingredients for good meetings. But one I just saw now, it left, but it's basically, it said here, too long without any purpose. So I think that's, length per se is not a problem if it's meaningful, right? If you feel like, okay, we just need to take this time to do whatever needs to get done, and you can't do it faster, then that's not the big problem. But this part of purpose, why are we in this meeting, why are we having this, connected to this. And I've seen this recently on LinkedIn. There was like a cartoon that says, okay, the purpose of the meeting is to sit together to find out why we're having the meeting. And it's like, oh yeah. So really, why are we having that meeting? And then of course, when you know that, then also are the people participating the right people for that purpose? And I think another frustration that I hear, especially in larger companies, there is sometimes this culture of, okay, let's just invite a lot of people to basically cover our asses, so that we cannot be accused of not having invited somebody. But then some people sit in there and feel like, why am I here? And I don't see that I can contribute, or that I should be here in the first place. And I think, of course, that's very frustrating. If you're in a meeting and you feel like you shouldn't be there. So these are some things. And then I think, yeah, a lot about bad preparation we also see here. So like no agenda, no structure. It seems a bit more like a bar conversation, which can be nice. However, then it's a bar conversation, and meetings are often a bit different. And then of course, I think what I also hear a lot is, and I haven't seen that on here, but then how people interact in the meeting. So the way people speak and interact with each other, and for example, what mostly nobody enjoys, apart from maybe the person doing it every once in a while, is just to say something for the sake of having said something. So that and it happens a lot, because you need to be visible. right? You need to gain visibility. So you basically reiterate a nonsensical thing, so just that you had your visibility, and that sucks.
Oh God, the number of memes that I've seen about that. Like, yeah, I totally. This is super valid, and all of these seem like everybody can resonate with this. Anything that has, like not starting on time to like everything over here. Super helpful. And I think like I'm gonna go back to this interview format over here. And again, like folks, if you have questions, feel free to type it over there, and like I can actually like bring that. But like double clicking on that one point that you mentioned about purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meeting purpose is one of the biggest things. And I think like there are so many different types of meetings, right? Like there are some meetings that are more about like alignment, decision making. Some of them are like literally like the bar conversations that you're talking about, right? Like they have like different purposes. And as long as like, and the question that I have more is when it comes to a virtual meeting or like a virtual setting, which of these thrive, which of these have like suffered a lot, and like just generally about like which of these are difficult to do nevertheless.
You say which type of meeting is difficult to do in a remote setting or in a virtual setting?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So in the book I came up with, and it's not me coming up and I built on stuff, but I differentiated between 4 types of meetings, which is dependent on the purpose of the meeting. And there is one we call like operational or tactical meetings, where it's a lot about synchronizing information relevant to ongoing stuff and projects and operations. Then there's one we call collaborative meetings, where it's about building a solution for something together and or making a decision on things, so that you need to collaborate. Then there is it's called learning and development meetings, where it's about learning from each other and improving things. And then there is a 4th type that we call like interpersonal meetings, where it could be about getting to know each other better and solving conflicts, for example, or to talk about difficult things. And I think that last category, the 4th category, the interpersonal meetings, I think this is the one where if we had a choice, often we would prefer to be in person, like in the same room, because as great as this is, and I love virtual and remote meetings because it saves a lot of travel and commute time and other advantages. However, there could be some situations where some of the communication cues that you get, and also in terms of, you see a part of my body, right? Body language and nonverbal stuff. And it could be that it's not exactly the same in a remote setting than being in the same room, although we can get very close to that. And I would feel for this so-called interpersonal meetings, these are definitely, I would feel, the more challenging ones in the remote setting, especially also like if you don't have like a tool like Zoom that we have, where you can do certain things and how you arrange people, for example. But if it's just like the standard, okay, here we are, and sometimes you don't even see people, these will be challenging because you're missing important information that are necessary for that purpose of interpersonal, like getting to know each other better, improving dynamics, solving conflicts. And those might be missing a bit in that setting.
Love it. I think this is super valuable, right? Like I think the 4 types of meetings that you said, like the ones that are driving outcomes, one that are like knowledge transfer, and one that are about like sort of the tactical things, and then like the interpersonal, where it's about fostering connection. I love it that like that's the one that's suffering the most because of how things are. I have a questions, but I think we have a question from Hendra, which I will like take over here. How can we gauge or get the feedback on how effective our meeting was? Should it be intentional? If yes, do you have any tips?
So Hendra, just to clarify if I understood the question correctly. So basically, meaning once we're done with the meeting, how do we know how effective it was, right?
That's true. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So what and I can just share like I call it like a good practice, because you can do this many different ways, but this is one. What we, for example, also inside CreEffective and when we work with customers do is we do at the very beginning of a meeting, we do a few minutes, like a retrospective that we have on a board from the past meetings, where we look at what has worked well and what do we want to change. And we would look at anything we want to focus on today, for example, to especially do or not do. And at the end of the meeting, we would spend again just a few minutes to look at our virtual retrospective wall, where we then would look, so how did it go today? And are there things that we would, for example, move from? So how did we do on the things that we wanted to focus on today in terms of how we do the meeting? So let's assume we said, okay, today let's really focus on letting people finish their sentences when they speak, because in the past we interrupted ourselves all the time. Then we would check and back on it and say, how did we do today? Did we improve? Are we any better than last time? And then there might be new points coming up that say, okay, so today actually what I noticed is we had like 2 3-minute coffee breaks. That was really helpful. We should keep doing that for coming meetings. And then you kind of collect that, and that's one way to do it. So to do like retrospective and just get perceptions from the people. How did it go? And anything we want to do differently next time, anything we want to keep. The main, and I feel like the most challenging part is that in a lot of organizations, they would say we don't have the time to do that. So it requires 5 minutes. And I would agree, like for 15-minute stand up, you don't do that, at least not regularly, right? But if you have like a 1-hour meeting, or depending on what it is, even a 2-hour meeting, if that is the case, then you can very well spend 3 minutes in the beginning and 3 minutes at the end. You could. And that's one way of doing it.
I really like this. This is sort of taking a sprint retrospective, or like a retrospective that you typically do to the next level, as like keeping accountability and making sure that like we really are like said the things that we said like we should start doing, are we really starting to do, or things that we should stop doing? Yeah, are we really doing that? I love that tip. Yeah, I think it's also sparking thoughts in my head as to like, it's like, hey, how can we do that in Zinc, which is in a way that is like way more efficient and way more like automated, so you don't have to like remember to do it or like force it upon the host to do that.
Maybe just very slowly very briefly to build on that. So what we, for example, do is we have a virtual whiteboard because it's remote. So we do things, right? So I don't use those anymore, but I use them virtually. And we would keep the record of the retrospective. So it's basically a retrospective board that has been developing over 2.5 years now. And we can just look back at that. So we don't have to start from scratch again every time, but we just look on, okay, what do we want to focus on out of these Post-its today? And which one do we move around at the end? So then it's really fast also.
Nice. I really like that. I feel like it's almost like a continuous thing rather than like a one and done. Love it. So speaking of like sort of the responsibilities of the host, right? Like I feel like it's almost like the meeting effectiveness is largely like the responsibility of the host. At least it's like becomes like that. So the hats that this person has to wear, right? Like they have to make sure that they're fostering connection. Are they efficiently running the meeting, starting the meeting on time, ending the meeting on time, driving the outcomes, sparking discussions, strengthening the teamwork, being inclusive? Like there's just so many things that's going on over here, right? Like, I mean, poor host. So just like thinking about this host, right? Like what is sort of ideal preparation for a host before they come for this meeting? What should be?
Sorry, that's one of my things. I never answer your questions directly, but I divert, but it just comes to my mind. So when again, in the book, you bring in a very important point. You said a meeting host. It's one way of looking at it. I differentiate it between different meeting roles that we have. And one, so I didn't call it meeting host, but I actually split that into 2 roles. One is called meeting facilitator. So that's the person who would take care of the process and the structure in the meeting, and for example, also ensure that people have their airtime and that we go according to agenda and everything. And then there's a second role that we call, and we borrowed that term from holacracy. I'm not sure if guys are familiar,
Yep.
but it's definitely a way. It's a way to organize an organization in a more decentralized way, and they have what they call a secretary. And so this is split because secretary role is a lot about documenting, visualizing, and also preparing the meeting and making sure we know what are the topics that we will talk about. We prioritize upfront the agenda. We make sure that all documents are available upfront to people. We make sure that people read stuff if it's necessary to do so. So we would have those two roles. That it's not so that, for example, as a facilitator like you today, Arjun, that you don't have to do the typing of results at the same time, because that might just be too overwhelming for one person to do at the same time. So we would have meeting facilitator and meeting secretary. And these are roles that one person, or that in this case, two people would have apart from their meeting participant head.
Right.
So that's also important. The way we look at this is that for most meetings, you do not need, just out of practicality, you do not need a dedicated person who is exclusively facilitating. For bigger, more complex things, I would recommend that. That's also how we make our money, partly, that we are the external facilitator, and there is value in having somebody not having stakes in the content and just being able to focus on the facilitation. But for most meetings, like regular meetings, you would have somebody appointed as, okay, this person will be the facilitator, this person will be the secretary. And for example, the way we do it is people are voted into office for half a year term, and then we rotate. So like in our team, we take turns, and like for this half a year, it's me being the facilitator. In the next half a year, I'm just participant only, and maybe the next half year, I'm the secretary, right? And we switch roles. I think the key part is it's explicit. We know who is going to be facilitator. We know who is going to be secretary, and people have the mandate to act accordingly, and it's okay for them to do so.
Love it. I think the idea of roles and like being very explicit about that, I really like that. Sort of tagging on to one of the things that you just mentioned about, like, some of these make sense for like these smaller meetings, and for bigger meetings that are different. And I think I want to like just double click on that, right? Like meetings are all shapes and sizes, right? Like I think there is the different modality, especially when it was in person. There was just like different ways in which people had meetings. Like your stand-up meeting was literally standing up versus like your meetings that were like hallway conversations versus like having it in a big ballroom where you're presenting to your whole company was so much different from like, having a walking one-on-one with your manager, right? Like, but now it's all a grid of faces. And I feel like with the virtual meeting, that's all changed. And like, how much is that, like affecting outcomes, and is that somewhat like causing any big problems right now?
Yeah, I feel it does in a negative way. I'm not on my camera. Okay, now you can see me better again. Just let me switch it on and off. It sometimes does that. So here we go. Okay, so in a negative way, if in a remote setting, it always looks the same, it could be that this conflicts with the purpose of the meeting, and we don't have enough variety, right? You said like in the physical space, if we have a one-on-one with a colleague, we might, the setting and the room, or maybe we just go for a walk outside, or we go to a specific room, and that would be different than if we want to have an all-hands meeting informing stuff. So that means the purpose and the number of people determines the setting and the setup of the meeting. And I feel, and I mean, this is what you're doing a great job at in SIMP, that you allow more flexibility and variety with that. But in a lot of organizations, it's just, okay, there's this go-to tool, meeting tool, and which is often Zoom or MS Teams that you often have as the standard tool, which is embedded, and it always looks the same. And sometimes, of course, it creates a certain fatigue. It's like, okay, yeah, again, not enough variety. And sometimes it's really that the purpose of the meeting would if you could consciously design the setup, it would require a different setup. That's like when you have a get together and people marry, then you choose a different venue and a different setup than when you want to solve a conflict in a group of people, or right? So it's, and you change the setup and the setting and the room based on the purpose. And I feel that the ability to be able to change the setup based on the purpose is a bit underdeveloped at the moment in the remote context with the tools we have.
I love it. Yeah, I think, I mean, it was a little bit of a leading question for sure, but in the sense that, like, I feel like your answer gave more clarity to this for me, in that, like, you know, like the environment gives the cue for the purpose. And I think, like, they are so intertwined in that, like, yeah, when you're standing in line at a coffee shop and, like, having a conversation is so different from when you're resolving a conflict to having a wedding. Like, these are so different conflicts, and, like, purpose are different. I love it.
I build on that because you can also see that in a in-person setting, that in certain companies they just have a meeting room, and whatever purpose the meeting is, it happens in that one meeting room. And sometimes you feel like, okay, that's kind of okay, works, but sometimes it just doesn't, because it's not the room itself is not suitable for the purpose, right? And that's a bit like having a stand-up meeting, and some people do this in the hallway, and people walk by in the back, and nobody cares, because we do a 15-minute sync, and we are completely transparent. Nobody cares. But if you need to talk about a conflict situation that you have with some other people, you don't want to do that in the hallway standing with everybody walking by, but you choose a different venue for that. And I think that's important to have in mind.
Awesome. Okay, this time has just flown by right now, and, like, when you're talking conflicts, when you're talking about all of these things, like, many other questions pop to mind, but I'm going to keep it. Maybe we may have to, like, invite you for, like, a part 2 of this conversation. But I'm going to, like, ask this one other last question before I go to, like, the money question of this, right? Like, the idea of international cultural differences. We briefly talked about this before this started, right? Like, managing different types of people, personalities, as well as different cultural identities that people have right now in, like, an international. Even for right now over here, we have people from India, from Guatemala, from US, and, like, everywhere across and in Taiwan. So what are some good tips that you have about that?
So there is, again, one book that I read, and I really loved it. And I read it because I like to read, but I also read it then for my preparation for my current book. It's called Cultural Map by a professor, Amy something. I forgot the name. She also wrote the book about No Rules about Netflix together with Reed Hastings. Sorry, I forgot her last name. It's called Culture Map. And what was really interesting, and she also talked about that in the book, and I think that makes a lot of sense. If you are in an intercultural, cross-cultural setting, people bringing in implicit rules about how things are done based on their culture, right? That's just how it is. And in many cultures can, in terms of how we do certain things, there can be vast differences about how it's done, right? So, for example, here in Asia, and you can say that in general in Asia, regardless of if it's Japan, Korea, or Taiwan, or China, for example, there is something that's called high power distance. So that means you respect hierarchy, and you don't directly object when something from higher up is bring an argument, which in the Netherlands, for example, it's the extreme case to the other case. When you have a meeting in the Netherlands, at the end of a 1-hour meeting, you still can't tell who the boss is, because it doesn't show. And it's very different cultural assumptions. And in China, you can tell before the meeting even started who the boss is. just by that person walking in. You will know. And so for cross, you can imagine for cross-cultural settings, if you put a bunch of Dutch people and Chinese people in the room and say just have your meeting, that's going to be fun, because there's so many different cultural assumptions of and this is just one dimension I mentioned.
Right.
So one advice that she gave, and I really like that, it makes a lot of sense to me, is because there's so many implicit things from different cultural backgrounds coming along, one way to deal with that is to be, for the team, to be super explicit about how we do things. So you can be, you can make super explicit rules in the way how we interact in meetings that would, in your own culture, would sometimes even, it would feel either offensive or stupid, because you say, why are we telling me this, right? I know this. But because in different cultures, there are different unknown implicit rules, it's important to make it explicit. So for example, they would say, okay, at the end of our meetings, what we do is we summarize the main points again. And make sure that we repeat again who takes which next steps. And she would bring that in her book, that she would say, so the British apparently would always do that. In Indonesia or the Philippines, they would never capture it in a written way, because that is supposed to be offensive to people, to write them down and to nail them on there.
Wow.
And the French, they would just say at the end, they would just say, "Et voilà," and we're done. And the British guy was in there, it's like, "Et voilà what? What are we doing?" But for the French, it was like, "Et voilà, we're done." and so that was a funny sense that, okay, we have to be explicit in a cross-cultural context so that everybody is very aware, and then it's also not awkward anymore, because we agree on it super explicit, and then the Filipino or the Indonesian person, sorry, I forgot, is not going to be offended if we have a written statement who does what at the end, and we just take away a lot of those implicit frictions that would otherwise be created.
I love it. Yeah. I think it's sort of putting on the Captain Obvious hat and then like saying out loud exactly what this is going on. Like, hey, in our meetings, we record it and then like we send it out to other people. Like, it's like those kind of things are like sometimes shocking for people. I love it. I think wearing that explicitly, like stating that out, in fact, like it might also be like a good icebreaker game for people to play, is like stating what your meeting culture is. Nice. This is great. I feel like I can, again, like, so many questions sparking. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to like ask one last question and like, sort of put you up on the spot over here, is like, if you were to give sort of 3 actionable tips for somebody hosting or one of these facilitators / secretary of a meeting, and if they have to like take 3 actionable tips today to make a difference in their meeting, what would that be?
So the first tip, and if you take one, just take this one, would be super clear on what the purpose of your meeting is. And that the purpose, again, would then define what kind of meeting category are we talking about. So is the purpose synchronizing information? Is the purpose making a decision? Is the purpose getting to know each other better? Or is the purpose just to improve ourselves? Because if I invite to a meeting and then say, let's talk about purchasing process, if that is the invite, it can be any of those 4 purposes. Invite about purchasing, talk about purchasing process, can be make a decision about it, inform, synchronize, make it better, or last time we clashed, let's talk about the conflict. Can be anything. So be clear. My purpose is we want to make a decision today on topic XYZ. That's the purpose of the meeting. So purpose is one. Another one that I would take is, actually, I also mentioned that already, but I think it's still a very good one. I call it like pop-up rules. So make explicit rules for your meetings, and you can see them like a pop-up store.
Nice.
They can be irrelevant after the meeting, but for the meeting, these are the rules how we do things, and they should be in a way that we think it will benefit to the meeting. So the pop-up rules. And the third one, that's a concept I learned from something called sociocracy, or sociocracy 3.0 actually. and it's called artful participation. Artful participation is just a one-sentence reminder that you can actually have a slide or put them even on the background of your canvas. And it says, it's just a reminder that we can ask ourselves at any time, it says, is my current behavior in this meeting the greatest contribution I can make to the effectiveness of this collaboration? And this could mean that sometimes, as I said before, I can, if I just ask myself that, it could mean just shut up. I don't have to say something just for visibility because it's not a great contribution. Or it could mean I really want to interrupt now because it's very important because we're going somewhere that we shouldn't be going, or I want to bring an objection or whatever, but be very conscious about what you say with the purpose of what's the greatest contribution. And I share one last story about that. I introduced it at a customer and I said, this is artful participation. And then one person got up, looked at the other 14 people in the room and said, I will leave this room now because that's the greatest contribution I can make to the effectiveness of this meeting, because I shouldn't be in here. You invited me, but I have no place in here. I shouldn't be there. And being artful, I leave. And he left. And before that, it would have been super awkward, but everybody was very much respecting his decision. I said, that's actually a great thing to do because you don't waste your own time and other people's time by sitting somewhere you shouldn't be. And he stood up and left. And that was
nice. Well done. This is, again, I think this is almost like the biggest 3 Ps of like great meeting: the purpose, the pop-up rules of your meeting, and participating artfully. I feel like that I almost like that whole like 3 Ps of this. This is a great tip. I feel like we are almost drawing to a close on this. Again, Florian, I'm going to thank you exclusively on this, but before I do that, I'm going to have to announce what we're doing next week. And this is episode 14, when we are going to talk to Tom Nguyen about when to go hybrid versus fully remote. We're very excited. In fact, like I'm even like considering that like we may do it a debate style with a couple of people who are more fully remote champions versus like Tom, who is a hybrid champion. And that would be like a good format for this talk show. I'm trying to find the right person for this. Any of you know a fully remote proponent and who will talk about this, please do let me know, and I would invite them for the show next week. Very excited for this. And with that, we come to an end over here. Florian, I have to tell you that this has been one of the more charged conversations that I've been in, and I feel like I could just keep having more of this. And I'm very serious when I say that like you should totally come here for part 2 of this.
Happy to do so. Sure.
Yeah, I love this. Folks, if you have any top takeaways from this, please type it over there. And while we're here, Florian, I think it would be great to hear your thoughts on like how the show was for you, as well as like what was good about like the way that this talk show happened.
So I think I very much enjoy being here. Maybe that is because I have a lot of airtime, but I also try to be very artful when I'm not the one being interviewed. But I think we just had a nice flow of conversation. And I think what also greatly supported this is that we like seeing on the screen that the setup changed a few times again in a meaningful way to support the purpose of our interview today. And I felt like, which is not always a given, but I could see most people's faces for most of the time, and just get a bit of a feedback for, have we lost people? Are we there? And that just makes it more fun also for me to be in. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Florian. That was super helpful. Folks, the rest of you, if any of you have any other thoughts on like what you want to tell Florian, or for me, or for anybody else, like this might be a good time to like talk about it.
I have one, sorry, that I want to add. Maybe if people are interested, so this will be online available later on, right? Okay.
Yes, there is going to be a video of this.
Cool.
That we're going to like share it.
Because maybe some people will be interested in the international version of that book that I'm currently writing, and there is I will give you a link if people are interested, if anybody wants to follow up or see this, then maybe they have a chance and then also have my contact. So if anybody is curious about that, I would share that with you, Arjun, and then we can share with folks later.
Yes, please do. Cool. I mean, again, like for folks in this meeting, obviously, there's just like a few over here right now. We did put like a link to like your information and LinkedIn where you can connect with Florian and continue this conversation for sure. But please do share a link to your book or so. We can like put that in the page that comes up for this episode.
Cool.
Fantastic, folks. I think that's pretty much what we have for the show today. This was great talking to all of you folks today. And if you don't have anything, this is bye.